In week 3, we will talk about 2 different very important things that affect society as far as sport is concerned. One is youth sport and how youth sport has grown, what different kinds there are, who organizes them, what is happening in terms of why they participate, why they drop out. And then the second part of the presentation will be on the coaching and the values and the challenges that coaches face. In many of the sports, we have a lot of volunteers, and these volunteers many times are not trained. But these 2 areas you've probably briefly seen and reviewed in Introduction to Sport Business Management. You've seen both of them talked about in several of the other classes. But these 2 things are 2 of the greatest impacts on society as far as sport is concerned. And society impacts these 2 things very greatly. And so it's important, as we briefly go through a few slides, I'm trying to just get the general idea of this, and you can fill in your reading, in your discussions, and in some of the videos that you watch. But it's important that these 2 things are addressed and to see how they interact and impact each other. As we continue into week 3 of Sport and Society, as we talk about freedom's Christian heritage, remember in the first week we mentioned some of the colleges and universities that were first started here in our country based on Christian faith. We talk about the key verse, "Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord," Psalm 33:12. Then we mentioned some key people and what they believed and what they felt when our country was first started. And now, just real briefly, some documents that were first produced for the laws and for the organization of our country. Mayflower Compact, you can see right here on the slide, said, "For the glory of God and advancement of the Christian faith and honor of our King and Creator, King and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia." They all felt that as they had this Mayflower Compact that it was important to say that they were establishing these colonies and this particular colony based on Christian faith. And then, of course, the First Amendment of our Constitution that says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. First Amendment gives us the right to worship as we please. And at the time the country was founded, there were so many people who really felt that Jesus Christ was the foundation. And then, of course, a document like the Declaration of Independence, the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Even this Declaration of Independence from England mentioned the Creator and that God has given us these rights to pursue life and liberty and happiness. I think it's so important as we think about our country, as we think about God, as we think about being believers, that we recognize that the foundation of our country in so many areas, we've talked about 3 and there are more. We've talked about the institutions, we've talked about people, and then there are so many more documents. Even the Gettysburg Address during the Civil War mentions God, and we will talk about some other areas that have been the foundation of our country. And I don't know if this means anything to you at all, but as you think about it, it at least is a thing to reflect on, to think how you might want to think about our country as you become a leader and a person who works in sport. Regarding the current status of youth sport in our country, very quickly, about half of all of the children in our country participate in some kind of sport for young people. And that's a lot. And yet the participation level peaks at age 11, and that's young. That means that 70% of U.S. kids drop out before high school. We always think we have so many kids participating in high school sport, but when you think that 70% of the kids before high school, they drop out at high school level, we don't have a high percentage of young people that are participating in high school sports. And then high school youth not on a school team drop out of sport or athletics unless they can get into some kind of a rec league. So we have a great number participating, but why do they drop out so early? Why are there not more in high school sports? And hopefully in our readings this week we will find that out. There are also some gender differences with regard to youth sport. Boys enter sport earlier than girls do, and girls drop out sooner than boys. That's an interesting statistic, an interesting two phrases. Probably something that doesn't really surprise us, but have you ever asked yourself, or maybe we should ask ourselves, why? And it's probably role models, a lot of it. Boys like to be like boys, and girls like to be like what they think girls are like. But I think this is changing with more and more women who have been athletes now pushing and promoting athletic endeavors by their little girls. Also, about 80% of girls who live in cities and 64% of girls who have in rural areas, they don't have any physical education classes in the 11th and 12th grades. So physical education in our schools is really depleted over the last century anyway, and now in order to get physical education or in athletics, certainly kids and their parents have to pay. And because of money and support and education, we don't have as many physical education classes, which eliminates the draw sometimes for kids. And then the figure is even lower for suburban girls for this. So the gender differences, a lot related to what girls don't do in relationship to boys. But when you look at the number of young people and young girls that participate in intercollegiate and interscholastic sports, that number is pretty high. Because we have this dropout and we have this lack of funding for youth sport in our schools, there are a couple things that have happened. First of all, entrepreneurs see that there's money in travel and travel teams and private coaching as these club teams. As we said before, young people are deciding that if they can develop their own club team programs and get parents to pay certain amounts of money. When I was coaching, I had a parent who had to mortgage their house so their young daughter could be on a travel team, and they do that hoping that the girl could be noticed and given a college scholarship. So this is how young people are participating. The parents are paying for it through these organizations of club teams that young entrepreneurs and even some that have been in it for a long time are providing and private coaching. So it's better than in the high schools or in the elementary schools. So this is what this is what's happening to help students continue to be in sport and entrepreneurs to make money. And then these other services, summer camps. We had lots of summer camps when I was a head coach at Indiana. We had 2 weeks of basketball camp, and it was a moneymaker. It was an opportunity for us to put more money back in our program, pay our coaches when the universities didn't have it, and then as we've gotten better now, it's a moneymaker privately for the people who own these camps. A lot of money in it. There's private lessons, and then there are people who set up these sports academies. So that's the privatization, sorry about the pronunciation, it's a hard word to say, of youth sport, and it privatizes it, and it takes away from the schools. So this is part of the big problem and also the answer to the problem of keeping young kids involved in activity. In these next two slides, we want to talk to you a little bit about why kids participate in sport. One of the reasons is for fun. That's the biggest reason. Most kids want to play because they want to have a good time, and then they want to learn and improve their skill. So we go from fun to wanting to get better. And then another one is to exercise and stay in shape. Fourthly, to do something they're good at. Fifthly, to experience the excitement and challenge of competition. And to hang out with their friends. So these are 6 of the reasons, the basic reasons why young people love to get involved in sport. They want to have fun. They want to improve their skill and learn. They want to stay in shape and exercise. They want to do something they're good at. Some kids don't know what they're good at until they start playing a sport. So if they start at soccer and they're pretty good at it, then they want to keep playing soccer. And then when they get into these competitive teams, it's exciting, and the challenge of the competition. They can't wait to put on their little shirts and their shorts and their shoes and go out and compete. And best of all, maybe for some of them, to be with their friends. Just as there are reasons why children engage and start playing sport, there are reasons why they drop out early. One reason is because the parents and the coaches just emphasize winning so much, and it puts a lot of stress on them. They feel like if they don't win when they're 4 and 5 years old and 7 and 8 years old, that it's not fun anymore, and then they don't want to play anymore. So they drop out. They get off the teams. In connection with this also is the stress that is put on them to perform at a high level, not just to win as a team, but to be the best. Parents want their kids to be the best so they can brag about them, and it puts so much pressure on little children that they forget that they're there to have a good time. It sometimes has cost too much now. Almost every team that a young child plays is going to cost the parents a lot of money, and sometimes when there's not a lot of discretionary funds, they have to stop playing. The parents become worried that they'll get hurt. I just spoke with someone the other day a father who said that he would not let his son play football at any level, at any age. I always think that that's more of sometimes about how mothers feel. You don't often hear a father say that, but he's very impacted by the risk injury that's involved in some sport, and football being probably the highest one. And then a lot of kids stop playing the normal soccer and baseball and softball and kickball and organized team sports like that. They go to alternative sports. And that doesn't really mean they drop out, but they drop out of the normal sport that society really kind of looks at, the alternative sport like snowboarding, some of the things that are a little bit more dangerous you do with a bicycle, all the other things that they want to do. And then a lot of the reason is their parents take kids out of these sports is because the coaches aren't trained, and they go and watch what coaches do. Parents think they know a little bit so they can coach. If you've taken or are about to take principles of coaching in our sport business concentration here at Hope, you'll know that coaching is a lot more than knowing a little bit about a game. And the training for these youth coaches is just not there, and so that makes a lot of kids, parents say no, they're not. We need to stop also and recognize that there are 2 different kinds of sport that young people, youth participate in. One kind is the athlete-organized sport, the one that the kids organize themselves. They have pickup games, and boy, I can remember so many times when I was young playing in pickup games, just going out in the yard behind my house and playing basketball or baseball or soccer, kickball. These were really fun to just organize ourselves. I can remember even in a field behind our house mowing the base paths for a baseball field, just doing it ourselves and making our own teams and devising our own rules and having our own tournaments. And it's too bad that this participation over the past 20 years has really, really gone down. And then you have the adult organized sports that are run by leagues and by parents and coaches and organizations, and that participation is increasing. I think a lot of all of this is due to the changes in our society and the technology that we have and all of the things that we know so much more about. But it also has, while it's good, it's bad, and it takes away this organized sport that young people do themselves. So maybe down through, as we go through these cycles in our society and as we see what's really good, that some of these athlete organized sports will come back. It's important as we deal with these two chapters in your textbook, one on youth sport and one on coaching, is that we spend a few slides just talking about the status of coaching. And this goes not just to the youth level, but all the way up through college and to some extent to the pros. First of all, there's more than 3 million youth sport coaches, and mostly they're volunteers. Having been a coach professionally for so long, I like to use the title coach with a degree of skepticism. Everybody likes to be called that. It's just something about being called coach. It makes you feel something that so many of these probably are not. But there are 3 million of them, about 3 million of them in the country, and they are coaching youth sport. The standards are few, they're low. They're often set by organizing groups. There's very little training. There is a national standards for sport coaches that's out now, and that's very good. And they have a difficulty defining coaching as a profession. And we don't have a difficulty defining coaching as a profession. That's what a lot of you may want to do. Some of you may already be doing it. Some of you may be wondering if that's what you want. But I would just say that our society is greatly affected by poor coaches. Sport is, as we know already, such a huge business and a part of our society that to have so many people coaching young people as they get older and mature, the coaches who do not have any training and know very little about what coaching means, is very harmful to the individual and also to our society. The next couple of slides talk about the types of coaches that we really have that are working today with all kinds of youth. The traditional coach is a conservative coach, one that doesn't take a lot of chances, that is very somewhat schooled in what coaching is. A lot of times they'll coach the way they've been coached, and they kind of have a clear concept of right and wrong. I think I'm probably started out as one of those traditional coaches. I was conservative in my discipline. I had been trained and had my own value system, had a pretty clear sense. You were on time. You did what you were told. You didn't lie. You were a good teammate. You were very other-oriented, and those are really good parts of coaching. But sometimes they are very traditional and don't change when society changes. Have a deep respect for tradition and for authority. How it was done before, if it's not broken, don't fix it. The coach is the coach, and the players are the players. And the times and the society and the young people growing up in our society are very different than the traditional way of coaching. The focus is on the development of the athlete, basically physical development. I know when I first started out, I wrote a philosophy of coaching, and the development that I wanted for my players was a complete development in all of the different domains of an individual: intellectual, physical, emotional, spiritual, social. And that focus was really on the development of the individual. And again, as I said, the behavior that a traditional coach has is something that they were modeled or they saw someone else do. They coached like they were coached. The current coach that we have, mostly now young people that are starting to coach, and they're using the traditional mix, but they're also providing a different look at what coaching means. They're less autocratic. They're probably less the way that I was when I first started. I feel down through the years, as I've coached so many years, that I have become less autocratic. There's a way to run your team without always reminding everybody by your actions and your behavior and the things that you say that you're the boss. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be always the one that says what happens, but you have to be the one to set the rules. And the current coach is less autocratic. They're more business and team-oriented. This, as young people grow older and you're coaching them more in high school and then in college, it is more about the business of what you're doing, not financial so much, but the business of accomplishing goals and using your team to help you more than you just doing it all yourself. And I think the current coach today are more tolerant of differences. And I will say this, if we're not more tolerant of differences today in our society, you're going to have a very difficult time being a successful coach. And our society is dictating that we become more like this. And that's why we study the influence, again, of sport and society on sport. That's an influence of changing and technology and differences in young people now than perhaps when I first started. But I believe in this current coach mix. I believe that it is extremely important that we are more geared to what the team as a team wants and needs, and that teams belong to teams. They don't belong to coaches. And as you train and help and give kids opportunities to grow and mature, they learn how to set parameters for themselves, and that's when coaching becomes really a lot of fun. As we've talked about coaching and how many of them are volunteers, and I just want to talk to you very briefly about the negative influence that coaches can have on young people and therefore on society. When you have coaches without training, they don't know anything but a little bit about the game. They don't know how to handle kids. They don't know how to handle problems. Instead of helping kids and encouraging young people to be their best and to do their best, they punish young people when they don't perform at the level the coach wants them to. They focus on winning, and they make the kids know that winning is what they're out here for, and no matter what it takes, they're going to win. And if they don't, then there's punishment with that. Because they do not have training and they don't have understanding of differences, they instill a lot of prejudice in young people just by the way they act because they're not trained. And then because of this, all of these things, the mental and physical abuse that young people take with poor coaches is great. And this is a tremendous problem in our society as we think about sport. Coaching has tremendous influence on young people. And that's why I'm so proud to have been one for so long. Because while you can have negative influence, you can also have very positive influence if you know what you're doing, and if you've been trained, and if you go to school, and if you learn about what the positive influences of coaches are and how you do them, how you exact that positive influence on them and not negative influence. On the flip side of negative influence, here are some things that coaches can have an influence positively if they're trained. The big key to this is the word consistency. A coach of positive influence is going to be consistent. One of the best things a coach can ever have said about them is that what they saw was what they got. The kids knew how the coach was. They were consistent and consistent in a positive way. And because they have been trained, they have new and innovative ways to teach a sport. Not only old drills. Some old drills are good, but not just old ones. New strategies. If you're trained, you can sit for hours and think of ways that are creative to help kids learn and grow and mature. They learn democratic and positive democratic leadership. It is not just about the coach, it's about the coach and the team working together for the good of everyone. And because of all this, athletes become very loyal. They believe in education. They develop integrity because they see it in a coach. And a coach is only going to have that if they have a positive and very succinct value structure. They have a philosophy of coaching that's based on their values, that's based on the good of the athletes, not on winning. Winning comes from it. It doesn't mean we don't want and love winning, but it means that that is an outcome of what we do as a coach that leaves a positive influence on young people. And you can fill all this in as you read it in your textbook, but I just really feel that one of the greatest influences of sport on society and society on sport is the coach. We've talked about the problems of coaching and the negative influences of coaching, and in our society, how can we improve the levels and qualities of coaching? One of the things that even volunteers who do not have a lot of training can do is have meetings, preseason meetings for players and their coaches, and sometimes their parents. But organizations that train coaches can have these meetings for the coaches that are going to do it, outlining the standards that they have for them, and then the coaches can have them with the players, and everybody kind of knows what's going on, and they're all on the same page. So many times the problems that arise is because we don't bring people together and we don't tell them what's expected of them, and everybody has a chance to ask questions and have input, and then we can proceed with being organized throughout the season. And in these meetings, we can create clear expectations for coaches. What do we expect these coaches to do? A lot of times, like if I owned clubs and I hired coaches to coach in these clubs, I would have these meetings for these coaches very much regularly, so that as I am organizing these opportunities for young people to participate in sport, and I choose the coaches that are going to do it, that is my integrity, my value system, my structure that these coaches portray. And then in following up on that, kids will then model what they see in their coaches. So clear organizational structure and an expectation that's clearly explained to coaches will help improve it. And then a lot of training in coaching skills, how to teach physical skills. I think one of the sports that does a great job in training their coaches is soccer, because so many young people are trained in soccer. We've had a lot of student athletes who have played soccer, who want to coach, who have gone through this training at different levels. And they're very proud when they go through this training that they get effective coaching skill training. And then effective procedures for filing complaints. In other words, if players and parents have complaints about what's going on with their children, they know what the procedures are that they can go through. They don't just start running around yelling and screaming and going to the newspapers and screaming at the coaches and screaming at them, but they can professionally and as mature adults file the complaints to try to get changes made so that their kids are coached more effectively. There also needs to be consequences for coaches displaying inappropriate behavior. You can't just go out and do anything you want. If you're trained, you won't. But if you are trained and you recognize that even though you're a volunteer, you are to coach professionally, and in some ways then coaching does become part of you as a profession.